Hey everybody, this video is called Warriors Join, and today we continue our Passthrough study here in the book of First Chronicles, rather than a typical topical Saturday, where we're going to be looking a little bit closer at the details of David's army. So chapter 12 verse 1 and 2 starts out, "Now these were the men who came to David at Ziklag while he was still a fugitive from Saul, the son of Kish, and they were among the mighty men, helpers in the war, armed with bows, using both the right hand and the left, and hurling stones and shooting arrows with the bow. They were of Benjamin, Saul's brethren." So Ziklag was located in the south near the Edomite border, and the territory, it was a territory that was ruled by the Philistines, who made David a ruler over it during the latter period of Saul's reign. And when Saul was pursuing David back in 1 Samuel 27 verse 6 through 7, this was prior to David taking the rulership over Israel, as seen in verse 38. And through verse 40, these events predate the last chapters, and they summarize the narrative that is given between 1 Samuel 27 and 2 Samuel chapter 5. And we see David's time in Ziklag is seen between 1 Samuel 27 and 1 Samuel 30. And this was a time when David lived in the territory of the Philistines to escape the murderous pursuit of King Saul. And even the tribal Benjamites, they were relatives of Saul. They pledged allegiance to David in his case, and they chose David over Saul because they knew that God was with David, that God had chosen David. And verse 3 through 15 says, "The chief was Ahiezer, then Joash, the sons of Shemaiah the Gibeathite, Zeziel and Pelet, the sons of Azmaveth, Berachah, and Zehu, the Anathothite, Ishmael the Gibeonite, a mighty man among the 30 and over the 30, Jeremiah, Hazael, Johanan, and Jozabad the Gedorthite, Eluzai, Jeremoth, Beliah, Shemariah, and Shephatiah the Haruphite, Elkanah, Jishiah, Azarel, Jozer, and Jashubim the Korahites, and Jola and Zebediah, the sons of Jerahim of Geder. Some Gadites joined David at the stronghold in the wilderness, mighty men of valor, men trained for battle, who could handle shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions, who were swift as the gazelles on the mountains. Ezer the first, Obadiah the second, Eliab the third, Mishmana the fourth, Jeremiah the fifth, Attai the sixth, Eliel the seventh, Johanan the eighth, Zozabad the ninth, Jeremiah the 10th, and Machbenah the 11th. These were the sons of Gad, captains of the army, the least over 100, and the greatest was over 1,000. These were the ones who crossed the Jordan in the first month, when it had overflowed from all its banks, and they put up to flight all those in the valleys to the east and to the west. So verses 3 through 15 here, we see that the Gadites were impressive soldiers, and they were known as men of courage and of warrior spirit. And these men, they were patiently received the training that was needed for mighty warriors. And they were the men who were skilled in their essential weapons, both defensive and offensive, with skills gained through their training. And these Gadite soldiers, they had a calm demeanor of men who were confident in God, and they had the countenance of fierce and calm warriors. And they were mobile. They were active men who were ready to fight wherever they were needed. You know, it kind of reminds me of the structure of our military before, we had some wacky president come in and weaken the military. But the chronicler records an example of the might of these men. They were brave warriors who crossed the Jordan at a dangerous time, as seen back in Joshua 3:15 and Joshua 4:18. And the first month was the month of Nisan, which was what our month would be like in March or April. And theologian Adam Clark stated that this was probably before the snow melt on the mountains, just as the Jordan began to overflow its banks, and it was leaving their attempt hazardous. And they came to help they helped David conquer the enemies on both sides. And the Gadites would cross over from the east to west. In verse 16 through 22 says, "And some of the sons of Benjamin and Judah came to David at the stronghold. And David went out to meet them and answered and said to them, If you come peaceably with me to help me, my heart will be united with you. But if you betray me to my enemies, since there is no wrong in my hands, may the God of our fathers look and bring judgment." Then the Spirit came upon Asmaiah, the chief of the captains, and he said, "We are yours, O David. We are on your side, O son of Jesse. Peace, peace to you, and peace to your helpers, for your God helps you." So David received them and made them captains of the troop. And some from Manasseh defected to David as he was going with the Philistines to battle against Saul. But they did not help them, for the lords of the Philistines sent them away by agreement, saying, "He may defect to his master Saul and endanger our heads." When he went to Ziklag, those of Manasseh who defected to him were Abna, Zozabad, Zedaiah, Michael, Jozabad, Elihu, and Zelathai, captains of the thousands who were from Manasseh. And they helped David against the bands of raiders, for they were all mighty men of valor, and they were captains in the army. For at that time they came to David day by day to help him, until it was a great army, like the army of God. So we see David's trust in God and we see that the Old Testament phrase used here, "Then the Spirit came upon Amasa." And when it says in the Old Testament that the Spirit came upon, it is speaking about the Holy Spirit. And it's used elsewhere back in Judges 6:34 and 2 Chronicles later on in chapter 24, verse 30. And when the Spirit came upon, it was the temporary empowerment by the Holy Spirit to assure David that the Benjamites and the Judahites were loyal to him, and that caused to show that he was blessed by God. In verse 19 and 20, it comes from the background given in 1 Samuel 29, verses 21, 22, and 1 Samuel 30 provides background. And the sons of Benjamin, they knew that God had helped David, and they wanted to follow him. And during this time in Ziklag, David attempted to fight with the Philistines against Saul and the army of Israel. And the Philistine lords, they feared David planned to defect his master Saul, so they refused to allow David and his mighty men to fight in the battle, as seen back in 1 Samuel chapter 27. And these men under David developed into an amazing force, which we looked at back on Thursday, known as the mighty men. In verse 23 through 37 says, "Now these were the numbers of the divisions that were equipped for war, and came to David at Hebron to turn over the kingdom of Saul to him according to the word of the Lord. Of the sons of Judah, bear and shield and spear, 6,800 armed for war. Of the sons of Simon, mighty men of valor fit for war, 7,100. Of the sons of Levi, 4,600. Jehoiada, the leader of Aaronites, and with him 3,700. Zadok, the young man, a valiant warrior, and from his father's house 22 captains. Of the sons of Benjamin, relatives of Saul, 3,000, until even then the greatest part of them had remained loyal to the house of Saul. Of the sons of Ephraim, 20,800 mighty men of valor, famous men throughout their father's house. Of the half tribe of Manasseh, 18,000, who were designated by name to come and make David king. Of the sons of Issachar, who had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do, their chiefs were 200, and all their brethren at their command. In Zebulun there were 50,000 who went out to battle, expert in war with all the weapons of war, stout-hearted men who could keep ranks. Of Naphtali 1,000 captains, and with them 37,000 with shield and spear. Of the Danites who could keep battle formation, 28,600. Of Asher who could go out to war, able to keep battle formation, 40,000. Of the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, from the other side of the Jordan, 120,000 armed for battle, with every kind of weapon for war. So we see the recount of the period of David's 7.5 year reign in Hebron until he was crowned king of the entire nation and was able to relocate to Jerusalem. In this narrative, it gives us a full circle back to the last chapter, verse 1. And the sons of Issachar, they were the men who supported King Saul up until the right time, and at the right time to give support to David. And to wrap up the verses here in the chapter, verse 38 through 40, all these men of war who could keep ranks came from Hebron with a loyal heart to make David king all over Israel, and all the rest of Israel were of one mind to make David king. And there were David 3 days, eating and drinking, for their brethren had prepared for them. Moreover, those who were near to them, from as far away as Issachar and Zebulun and Naphtali, were bringing food on donkeys and camels, on mules and oxen, provisions of flour and cakes of figs, and the cakes of raisin, wine, oil, and oxen, and sheep abundantly, for there was joy in Israel. So we see the feast was associated with the king's coronation back in 2 Samuel chapter 5. And this celebration was for a time to recognize David as their king, to receive their rightful and anointed king, as it brought joy to Israel. So to wrap up, quick wrap up here today, we look at the devotion of David's army. We see that even the Benjaminites, the tribal relations of Saul, the tribal relatives of Saul, came to David. And it kind of reminds me of modern day when I see a North Korean soldier defect into South Korea. And we see that David received the loyal soldiers at the stronghold. And in verse 18, it says that the Spirit came upon Amasa. And there's another verse in the New Testament I want to read. Luke chapter 24, verse 49. It says, "Behold, I send the promise of my Father upon you, but tarry in the city of Jerusalem until you have endured power from on high." And so Jesus, he promised his followers that they would be clothed with power from on high. And it's speaking of the Holy Spirit at the ascension of Jesus. And we looked at the army of the tribes of Israel today. And we look at the chapter ending with their great support of Israel's new king. So that's going to wrap up today's study. We'll see you next week as we're going to look at King David bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. So I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. God bless.